The idea that Muslims are hostile towards those who don't share their faith is an idea that has become more or less axiomatic in America's popular religious discourse. According to widely accepted stereotypes, the Quran mandates death for all non-believers and second-class citizenship for Christians and Jews. A random sampling of what's on offer in the internet's countless anti-Muslim websites renders a seemingly endless queue of narratives recounting horrific tales of Muslim cruelty towards non-Muslims, especially towards Christians and Jews. While it is true that Muslims exist alongside Christians and Jews in a world that often is violent, and sometimes that violence takes on religious dimensions, Islam is a faith that understands the project of making peace between religions, especially the Abrahamic traditions, as being central to its mission. This commitment to interfaith cooperation is not a modern innovation. At the birth of Islam, right after the angel Gabriel first spoke heavenly words to the prophet, according to Muslim tradition, Muhammad's first confidant, other than his wife, was a cousin by marriage who was a Christian monk. A few years later, when the political establishment in Mecca began to oppress the early Muslim community, a significant portion of Muhammad's followers found refuge in the Christian kingdoms of Abyssinia. During the wars of Muslim conquest, Muhammad and his successors instructed armies of Islam to respect Jewish and Christian houses of worship. In the Middle Ages, as Christians in Europe laid the groundwork for more than 12 centuries of church-sponsored pogroms and purges, Jewish communities were thriving in southern Spain, across North Africa, and throughout the Middle East. Interfaith goodwill is a value written into the DNA of Islam. It is a virtue most Muslims today long to share with anyone willing to join in the conversation.
I would say my favorite single line from the Quran is from Surah 49, which says that God made us different nations and tribes that we may come to know one another. In the sense that diversity is holy, and it was created by God, and what we humans are meant to do with that diversity is engage in positive interaction with each other, and to come to know one another, first of all because knowledge is holy, and secondly because pluralism or positive engagement is holy.
Even during the Crusades, for example, there were cultural exchanges, there were commercial exchanges, there were even religious exchanges, in the sense that Muslims welcomed pilgrims from European Christianity to holy sites in the Middle East. And we should bear in mind, of course, that Eastern Christianity, right, only exists today because the Muslims tolerated it, right? Now, none of that is to say that those experiences are the equivalent of modern toleration. Of course they're not. But on the other hand, we know that in the Islamic world, Christians, Eastern Christianity, right, many Eastern Christians played very important roles in the development of Arabic and Islamic culture and learning, right? And they continue to do so throughout Islamic history, including the modern period. So we do have positive examples of cooperation and mutual collaboration on things that were beneficial to humanity as opposed to just conflict. So we shouldn't turn our back to that as a possibility, especially given today's world in which there are many more opportunities for fruitful cooperation and collaboration and mutual respect.
I think that first we need to look inside ourselves, each and every one of us, and think about how to talk to people, one person at a time, in a way that overcomes our instinct to think of another person as the other. And I think that this is something that comes out most in relationships with Muslims, right? Is that there is still the sense, no matter how open-minded we are, no matter how tolerant we are, that this person is still other to me.
Sometimes interfaith dialogue gets conflated with politically correct dialogue. In other words, you come together, you say some nice things, you eat some bread, but just don't talk about the things that you really want to ask one another, that really agitate you, that you may have some genuine concerns about. Listen, if an average Muslim growing up in the United States is exposed to 40-second sound bites of exposure to Islam, like most people, like 95% of Americans, you are going to harbor some, I don't care how progressive you may think of yourself, how liberally minded you may think, or how forward thinking, you're going to have some unresolved anxieties and concerns and questions about Muslims and Islam. And I personally don't think those who come into any setting with Muslims are doing themselves or even the effort of broadening a deeper understanding any good by restraining themselves from engaging around those types of conversations. I think likewise, the Muslim community and other communities, sometimes we have to be more transparent and open about the types of thought processes and anxieties that go along with even attending some of the conversations.
What really makes me hopeful about bridging the gap between Muslims and non-Muslims is the work of education. I teach in a university, and what I find incredibly heartening is to really spend time with students over the course of a semester, and having them come to a kind of transformative understanding of who they are and who they can be in relationship to Muslims. In a world that seems chaotic and sometimes hopeless and doomed almost, the ways in which I have found students to really be willing to look inside themselves and to do the very hard work of really searching the self and to think about how one can relate to someone who is different, and the real sort of brave, courageous work of self-reflection that I have seen in so many students gives me hope. One of the other things that gives me a lot of hope is the tremendous artistic production that we see coming out of up-and-coming young Muslims, Muslims who are engaging the art forms of hip-hop and independent theater and visual arts, Muslims who are really working to develop a language to speak what remains unspoken, to speak the things that maybe just can't be spoken in words, right? We're living in times where Muslims self-censored or are already censored from the outside, and so to use art as a vehicle to really liberate the voice of Muslims gives me tremendous hope.
As Muslims, there is a deep encouragement to be a part of society. And so as Muslims, we are supposed to enrich an environment wherever we go. We are always supposed to actually make it better than we found it. That goes to, if you visit someone's home, you should make their home better than how you found it, let alone a land, a country, a government. For Muslims, being politically involved and bringing a sense of fairness in the business practices, a sense of social justice, that individuals should be treated with compassion.
You know, there's a saying of Ben Franklin that God helps those who help themselves. In Islam, what it says is God helps those who help others. And I think that it takes you one step further. And if you use that across society, helping each other, society would be a much better place.
I founded my initiative after 9/11 at the instigation, if you will, of a number of very dear friends who were non-Muslim, who said, you know, Faisal, we have to do something to improve U.S.-Muslim relations. So we conceived of this initiative, and when we looked for a name, we had a focus group consisting of Muslims, Christians, and Jews, and the name the Cordoba Initiative won the most votes. Cordoba is the name of a town in Spain. There was a Cordoba Caliphate from roughly the year 800 to the year 1200 approximately was the peak of the Cordoba Caliphate. It was a place in which Muslims and Christians and Jews lived harmoniously. It was, at its time, one of the most civilized places with the largest library in the world. It was a place also where there was important exchange between the Muslims who had, at that time, cultivated all of the knowledge of the world and developed and advanced it to Europe. So many people like Francis Bacon came and studied in Cordoba, and many of the books of the that were hitherto lost to Europe, like the Greek philosophers that were translated from Greek into Arabic, were then translated from Arabic into Latin in Cordoba, and this triggered the Enlightenment, and there was an exchange of knowledge between the Muslims and the Europeans, who were predominantly Christians and a minority of Jews. It was the place where Moses Maimonides, the greatest rabbinical and Jewish philosopher, was born and lived. He had to escape from there, as did Muslims during the Inquisition, but he wrote in Arabic. He was influenced by Arabic thinking, Islamic thinking, and we felt that what we wanted is also to symbolize both this convivencia, as they called it in Spanish, between the faith communities, but also this partnership and this exchange between Muslims and Christians and Jews around a set of shared values and shared objectives.
My best friends in high school were an extremely religiously diverse group of people. It included a Cuban Jew, a South Indian Hindu, a Nigerian evangelical, a Mormon, a Lutheran, and a Catholic, and then myself, who's a Shia Ismaili Muslim from India. And we got along great. And this was in the early 1990s, and as the 1990s went on, there were more and more images of religious violence. And I would always remember thinking, like, looking at those images of violence on the evening news and thinking back to my friendships with people who were from different religious backgrounds, and basically thinking, shouldn't the world look more like my high school lunch table?
To me, when Jesus was asked, what is the greatest commandment? He said, to love the Lord thy God with all of your heart, all of your mind, all of your soul, and in another gospel, all of your strength. And then he was asked again, and he said, the second commandment, which is equal in importance to the first, is to love thy neighbor as thyself. Then he adds, upon these two commandments hangs all of the law and all of the prophets. Islamic law, what we call our Sharia, is based upon these fundamental two commandments. Islamic doctors of law divided the law into laws of love of God or worship of God, and laws of how to deal with what they call worldly affairs. So to me, the rule of law means the rule of these two commandments. Law enforcement at its core must be predicated on these two commandments that Jesus mentioned, which is quoted in Deuteronomy and is common to our faith traditions, the Abrahamic faith traditions. So if we agree that this is the basis of how we get to know each other, and this is the basis not only of our understanding of how do we love each other, because love is tough, love isn't easy, and Jesus' message is about love. Love thine enemy, even, he said.
I think that if you get to know people, whatever their background is, then you have less fear. You know that they don't hate you, they're not out there to kill you. And the task falls upon each one of us. It's not come and teach me what your religion teaches and I'm just gonna sit here. It's, citizenship is an active thing. We live together, we either thrive together or we perish together.
What does it mean to love God? What do you mean by loving neighbor? It's not a mushy kind of a thing. It's an act of engagement with God, connecting at the level of our fundamental nature, which is the image of God within and within other people.
The central value in Islam is mercy. the Holy Quran says that the Prophet Muhammad was to be sent as nothing but a mercy upon all the worlds. The most common prayer in Islam is Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of God, the all-merciful, the ever-merciful. What Christians, if there's one word a Christian should know about Muslims, it's mercy. If there's one word that Muslims should know about Christians, it's love. The central value in Christianity is love, right? What Jesus does is an embodiment of love and brings the ethic of love, and he shows that in so many ways, even to those who crucify him. And so if there's one thing that Muslims ought to know about Christians, is it's the centrality of love.